As the late afternoon light slanted through the windows, dust motes floated lazily in the air. In that haze, the newly inherited dollhouse stood out like a relic from a bygone era. Its faded wallpaper, tiny curtains, and intricately carved wooden facade looked fragile, yet there was a certain lurking presence that seemed almost alive. Serena shifted uneasily, aware of a tension she couldn't name. She had seen old toys before, but never one that exerted such a curious pull on her attention. The dollhouse had belonged to her husband, Jace's grandmother, a woman rumored to have practiced fortune-telling and other forms of arcane arts. They discovered it in the attic just a few days ago, when the family moved into the old estate. Serena was dusting and unpacking, rummaging through a stack of boxes, when she heard her daughter Violet call out. By the time she turned around, Violet and her little brother Marcus were kneeling before a large, sheet-draped structure beneath a solitary window. Violet tugged the cloth away, unable to hide her excitement at the sight of the once grand, now time-worn dollhouse. Despite the unsettled feeling that swept over her, Serena sighed and agreed to bring it downstairs. The children never had a proper dollhouse, one with working miniature lights and fine little furniture. Marcus asked Jace if he could fix the hinges and sweep away the cobwebs. Already the siblings chatted excitedly about telling stories with tiny porcelain dolls, inventing elaborate adventures in the quiet confines of the miniature home. At first there seemed little reason to worry. Serena simply noted that the dollhouse had an odd design. The living room, dining room, kitchen, even the attic level mirrored the layout of the actual house they lived in. The similarity was so uncanny it made her skin tingle. She pointed this out to Jace, who shrugged it off, suggesting it was a model built using the estate's blueprints. Maybe his grandmother's father or grandfather found the plans and chose to transform them into a toy. Yet Serena couldn't help feeling it was more than coincidence. The handmade furniture was arranged in precisely the same spots as their real-life counterparts. The pastel wallpaper matched their dining room's faded florals. Even the minuscule paintings on the walls were exact reproductions of those in the corridors. One morning, Serena noticed Jace standing before the dollhouse, engrossed. He had discovered that the door to the attic level was locked. As soon as he tried to pry it open, the door stuck fast, as if the wood had fused from decades of disuse. While Jace fiddled with the tiny latch, Marcus asked questions. "Does the attic have dolls of us in it, Dad? Does it have secrets?" Jace shrugged in that gentle fatherly way, but Serena saw him struggle a bit. A faint, irritated hiss escaped his lips when he couldn't force the door open. Finally he gave up. They concluded the attic level was locked for its own reasons, possibly warped from moisture, or an interior mechanism that had jammed. They soon forgot about it in the bustle of everyday life, especially with the children starting a new school year. Over the following weeks, though, Serena developed a strange habit. Whenever the house felt eerily silent, when Jace was in his study and the kids had gone to bed, she would tiptoe into the living room to inspect the dollhouse. She found herself drawn to it, as if it were calling her name. At night, the dollhouse's miniature lights appeared to flicker, sometimes glowing with no apparent power source. She'd rub her eyes, blinking in confusion. Then the lights would be dark again, leaving her uncertain whether she had imagined them. The first incident happened in mid-October. Violet woke up screaming. Serena and Jace rushed to her side, discovering she had a feverish expression, soaked in sweat, eyes wide with terror. She pointed to the corner of her bedroom, gasping something about a figure standing there. As Jace comforted her, Serena left to fetch a glass of water. Passing the living room, she felt compelled to glance over at the dollhouse. There, in the miniature bedroom on the second floor, Serena saw a tiny porcelain doll that looked disturbingly like Violet, wearing the same pink nightgown. The doll had been standing upright before, but now it slumped face down, arms twisted at odd angles. A miniature glass of water lay spilled on the floor next to it, even though it hadn't been there earlier. That detail haunted Serena in the morning as she recounted it to Jace. He looked uncomfortable and quickly changed the subject, choosing to interpret her observations as a mother's anxious imagination. Violet shrugged off the memory of terror, though it took her a day or two to recover her usual cheer. For a while after, all seemed well again. Then came the night of the storm. Rain pelted the windows with a relentless fury, and thunder shook the rafters so violently that the children insisted on camping out in the living room. They laid sleeping bags by the fireplace, the glow of embers dancing across their faces. With Jace dozing in the recliner and the children curled up side by side, the only sound was the pounding rain outside. Serena woke abruptly to a furious flash of lightning, jolting her senses. She felt as if someone were tugging on her blankets. The living room was illuminated for an instant, and in that moment she noticed the dollhouse's windows shining with an ethereal blue-white glow. Every tiny window was lit, as if from within. She got up, ignoring the goose flesh on her arms, and carried a flashlight over to examine the house. Peering through one of the miniature windows, she almost let the flashlight slip from her grip. In the tiny living room of the dollhouse, she could see faint shadows moving. It was impossible. There weren't any dolls there, just furniture. Yet for a brief second, she swore she saw multiple silhouettes flickering on the walls like dancing apparitions. Another explosive crash of thunder rattled the roof. She whipped around, but saw only her sleeping family. When she turned back to the dollhouse, the miniature windows were dark once more. That same week, strange coincidences began to unfold. Marcus tripped in the driveway, skinned his knee, and Serena noticed the solitary figurine in the dollhouse's front yard had toppled forward. Left knee chipped. Violet's pet hamster died unexpectedly, and, disturbing as it seemed, Serena found a tiny plush toy in the dollhouse's nursery that had been torn open as though by some invisible force. One evening, as silent dread swirled in her mind, Serena caught an urgent glimpse of something else. The front door of the tiny home was ajar. She reached into the dollhouse, pushing it closed, and caught a glimpse of movement inside. It looked like a small figure darting from one doorframe to the next, but when she bent down to see more clearly, everything was motionless. Telling Jace about these visions only triggered exasperation in him. Until something happened that no one could easily dismiss. Serena woke one morning to find Jace in the living room, rigid as a statue, staring into the dollhouse. He called her over in a trembling whisper. The miniature dining room scene had changed overnight. The table was overturned, chairs scattered haphazardly. A tiny porcelain version of Jace, recognizable by the shape and color of its hair, lay sprawled across the floor near a miniature sideboard. The porcelain figure's left arm was missing, snapped off at the shoulder. A trickle of red paint marred the miniature rug, as if the figure had bled. Jace slowly extended his own left arm, examining it in the dawn light. They exchanged a look of profound unease. Could it be some child's prank? When confronted, Marcus and Violet both insisted they knew nothing about it. In the subsequent days, Jace braced himself for an injury to his arm, refusing to ignore the sign. He stopped playing pickup basketball with friends, refusing to do anything that might cause an injury. He even steered clear of the power tools in the shed. For a few weeks, no harm came, though the feeling of dread lingered. Then, while climbing on a ladder to fix a broken gutter, Jace slipped. Desperate not to fall, he caught the edge of the roof with his left arm jammed awkwardly. He heard the crack. Pain flared immediately as he landed in a heap on the soft flower bed below. The paramedics confirmed a fracture to his upper arm, though thankfully it wasn't a complete break. Despite the mild nature of the injury, the parallel was unmistakable. The dollhouse had foretold the accident. No longer could he simply dismiss Serena's claims as paranoia. With each passing day, the tension in the house thickened, intangible yet pressing against their minds. Marcus startled easily, shadows under his youthful eyes betraying his restlessness. Violet became quiet, almost vacant, focusing intently on the dollhouse's occupant dolls, as though mesmerized by them. Serena noticed that whenever Violet and Marcus played near the dollhouse, they didn't exactly move the dolls around of their own accord. It was more as if the dolls guided their hands, choosing their own positions. In an attempt to regain control, Jace decided they should store the dollhouse away again, lock it in the basement, and keep it out of reach of the children. Yet on the night he planned to do so, something changed. The attic door of the dollhouse had popped open. Despite Jace's previous efforts, the attic latch was now unfastened. One small detail made the discovery even more chilling. From inside the dollhouse's attic drifted the faint smell of burning candle wax. Against good judgment, they peered in, expecting to see more porcelain furniture or dusty corners. Instead, they found something akin to a miniature shrine. Tiny candles, 8 in total, each about half the size of a fingertip, were placed in a circle around a black figurine. Jace frowned, shining a pin light into the cramped space. The figurine was shaped like a robust woman wearing a lacy blouse with a cameo at her throat, an uncanny resemblance to Jace's grandma. Next to it was a minuscule journal with scribbles that looked like glyphs or runes, though too small to decipher. Serena felt adrenaline surge through her, urging her to snatch the entire attic's contents out. But as soon as her fingers touched the candles, a deep wave of nausea churned in her stomach, forcing her to retch. She recoiled and clutched the edge of the dollhouse for balance, heart pounding. Jace guided her away, his own face ashen. Silently, they decided to leave the shrine as it was. However, Jace still insisted on storing the dollhouse in the basement. If it were out of sight, maybe they could free themselves of its eerie power. No sooner had Jace carried it down the creaking steps to their cold cellar than calamities began to befall the family in rapid succession. Marcus became ill, coughing up blood one night, making Serena rush him to the emergency room. Doctors were baffled. They found no internal damage. Violet began to speak of hearing voices that beckoned her to come upstairs, though she was physically downstairs in the living room. She also started drawing disturbing pictures. Black silhouettes overshadowing a smaller figure, or the estate itself, with windows ablaze. Meanwhile, Jace couldn't sleep, plagued by nightmares of a shriveled old woman whispering predictions in his ear. Desperation finally drove them to fetch the dollhouse from the basement and set it back with careful reverence in the living room. It was as if a malevolent force demanded their compliance. The tragedies relented somewhat, though an oppressive gloom persisted. Serena noticed the furniture inside had been rearranged, as if the house was reset after being locked away. A new doll, previously unseen, now appeared in the second-floor library, a pale figure with the rough shape of the family dog that had died years ago. It made no sense, and yet, there it was. In the uneasy stillness of after-midnight hours, Serena and Jace decided to search for any old records or diaries from his grandmother. They found a stack of hidden letters in an antique chest. The fragile parchment indicated that Jace's grandmother had once belonged to a circle of spiritualists who believed in channeling otherworldly powers through man-made vessels. One letter in particular was singled out by a dark ring of dried candle wax. It described a technique to instill the echoes of future fates inside a constructed effigy of one's home. The author warned that such a vessel was both a blessing and a curse, able to reveal tragedies, yet also magnify them if the vessel wasn't appeased. Armed with this knowledge, the couple debated how to destroy the dollhouse. Fire might do it, or smashing it to splinters, but the letter clearly indicated that any destructive action taken against the vessel, once awakened, would provoke a vengeance far worse than the tragedies it predicted. They would not just lose a limb, but risk an outcome that might be irreversible and catastrophic. The next day, in an attempt to gather clues, Serena studied the dollhouse inch by inch. She mentally matched every room with its real-life counterpart. She noticed that in the miniature dining room, the wine glasses had been replaced by black tumblers. The children's bedroom figurines looked worn, their colors drained. The attic shrine remained the same, giving off that faint candle wax odor. She saw that each door within the dollhouse was slightly ajar, except for one, the bathroom door. It was sealed shut as though stuck in place. Trying to open it with a toothpick, she felt an unmistakable chill in her fingertips, and she heard a minuscule splash of water inside. A wave of dread rolled over her, conjuring an image of drowning or suffocation. As autumn withered into winter, the predictions turned increasingly dire. One evening before Christmas, Serena watched helplessly as the dollhouse's living room interior became disheveled overnight. The couch was thrown across the room, and the small porcelain mother figure was marooned at the center, arms upraised, a painted expression of horror etched on its face. The next morning, Serena's father died of a stroke hundreds of miles away. Though it wasn't the same event as an overturned couch or direct violence, she felt that the dollhouse had presaged a gloom in her life, and fate had found a different channel to deliver it. Despite their best efforts to stay vigilant, the tragedies came at intervals, unpredictable. Minutes stretched into days, days stretched into weeks, and the family lived under constant tension. Violet's drawings became more frequent, often depicting a looming shadow over the dollhouse. Marcus developed a habit of standing in front of the actual dollhouse, tears silently rolling down his cheeks as he stared at the miniaturized version of his bed, his toys, his future. Finally, on a bitterly cold January night, they discovered the miniature front door torn from its hinges, revealing a new occupant inside the foyer. A dark figure about 2 inches tall, which reminded Serena and Jace of a robed silhouette bending over a smaller figure on the floor. Children's sake or not, they realized they needed to break this cycle somehow. Serena remembered the mention in the spiritualist letters of appeasement rituals. Render an offering of what the vessel desires. The letter suggested that the dollhouse might want an item symbolic of the family's future well-being. Fear saturating every breath, Serena and Jace decided to proceed with a subdued plan. Together with the children, they selected small personal objects, something each held dear. Violet gripped a silver charm bracelet, a gift from her grandmother. Marcus offered a wooden toy truck. Jace contributed his late father's pocket watch, while Serena offered her wedding ring. One by one, they placed these items in a carved wooden box, a box just small enough to rest on the floor of the dollhouse's living room. As soon as they set the wooden box inside, an almost imperceptible hum vibrated through the real living room. The miniature windows flashed momentarily. One by one, the porcelain dolls that represented each family member seemed to bow forward. The hush that followed was profound. Cold air tingled across Serena's arms. A flicker of hope rose in her chest. Maybe they had placated whatever dark force inhabited the dollhouse. That hope was short-lived. Late that night, a shattering shriek ricocheted through the hallway. Marcus was nowhere to be found when Serena burst into the children's bedroom. The window was wide open, frigid air whipping the curtains. She rushed to the front yard, her heart pounding. Jace sprinted outside with a flashlight, fear etched in every line of his face. They found Marcus, huddled in the driveway, barefoot and shivering, staring at the narrow attic window of their house. He insisted a woman's voice had called him from that window, telling him to come closer. A black silhouette had beckoned him. The parents gathered him up and rushed him inside, but the damage was done. He was trembling uncontrollably, unable to speak. Exhausted and terrified, Serena crept back to the dollhouse. There in the attic, the shrine glowed faintly, as if some internal flame illuminated the circle of candles. The black figurine of Jace's grandmother looked different. The cameo around its neck had been replaced by a silver circle, perhaps Violet's bracelet, or some other contamination from their offering. Panic tightened Serena's chest as a horrifying realization dawned on her. The dollhouse didn't want their cherished objects. It yearned for more. It demanded real tragedy, feeding on each act of terror and despair. Jace found her huddled on the living room floor, tears staining her cheek. She explained her realization through choked sobs. Alarmed, he gently lifted her to her feet, resolved to end it once and for all. He gathered an axe from the shed, ignoring Serena's pleas about the dire warnings in the letters. His mind was set. He intended to destroy the dollhouse, consequences be damned. He swung the axe down with trembling courage, smashing through the delicate roof. Instantly, a howling wind tore through the real house, rattling every window pane. A shriek like twisting metal reverberated, and the dollhouse's attic candles flared with unearthly intensity. Jace's next strike sheared off the second-floor walls, sending splinters of wood and fragments of porcelain scattering across the living room. Violet and Marcus screamed, rushing behind the couch, covering their ears. The moment the dollhouse fell into pieces, an unimaginable terror tore through the estate. Lights flickered violently, then died, plunging the family into darkness. A sense of something hungry and ancient advanced across the threshold, looming invisibly. Serena fumbled for a flashlight in the chaos. She managed to find it just in time to see the living room walls cracking, from ceiling to baseboard, as if unstoppable tremors came from the very foundation. In the beam of the flashlight, she witnessed a shadow shape, human in outline, elongated, with arms that seemed to stretch floor to ceiling, swallowing the broken remnants of the dollhouse with its intangible presence. Suddenly, the shadow turned to face them. She couldn't see any eyes, yet she felt its devouring gaze. From the corner of her vision, Serena saw Marcus on his knees, sobbing, Violet clutching his shoulders. Jace was a silhouette of fear and fury, gripping the axe, apparently prepared to defend his family. The shadow advanced, and the house itself groaned, threatened to collapse. In the next lancing flash of light, Serena glimpsed something fleeting. Behind the shadow, as if in another dimension overlaid with their living room, stood a massive version of the same dollhouse, but impossibly large, an infinite reflection of the labyrinth of tragedies that had ensnared them. She felt a resounding crack and realized one of the overhead beams had given way. Broken plaster and dust rained down. The moment the debris struck the floor, the shadow shape contorted, stretching around the family. Serena squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for some unimaginable blow. Instead, there was a thunderous roar, and suddenly the presence receded. In the flicker of the flashlight, she saw the shadow shrink, retreating into the broken remains of the miniature structure. Then, a strange hush descended. The kids whimpered, and Jace's hold on the axe loosened. They scarcely breathed. Shaken, they looked around. The living room was battered but still standing. A gaping crack zigzagged along one wall, and plaster dust lay thick as snowdrifts. But there was no sign of the monstrous shadow figure, except for an icy chill in the air. At the center of the wreckage lay splintered fragments of the dollhouse. Its wooden framework was collapsed beyond repair. The roof in pieces, the tiny furniture pulverized, and in that disfigured mass the black figurine was broken. Whatever power thrived there no longer stirred. Joshua, the old cat, mewed from behind the couch, his eyes gleaming with residual panic. Violet and Marcus stayed close to their parents, trembling. For a long moment, no one spoke. They understood that they may have narrowly avoided a far worse fate, though the lines between what they had destroyed and what might still linger remained uncertain. Eventually, flickering power returned, lights glowing dimly overhead. They gathered themselves and gingerly cleared away the shards, working in silence. No one mentioned those horrifying shapes and the illusions of a dollhouse grown to enormous scale. The final steps of cleanup were done in a muted, haunting calm, like the hush after a violent storm. With each broken piece they threw away, they silently prayed that the nightmares, the predictions, and the tragedies had ended. Though the house's foundation would require repairs and the living room walls demanded an expensive remodel, the family found themselves free from further ominous signs. Marcus had no more strange illnesses, Violet ceased her morbid drawings, and Jace's nightmares grew less frequent. Now and then, Serena caught herself standing in front of the living room's empty space where the dollhouse once sat, half expecting a flicker of miniature light or the ghostly echo of laughter in tiny rooms. She would find no sign, yet a fragile, uneasy question loomed in her mind. Had they truly vanquished the power that once lived in that cursed vessel, or had it simply moved on, waiting in the dark corners of the house? Seasons passed, the estate refurbished to renewed comfort. When a sibling or friend asked the children about the dollhouse, they would shake their heads, refusing to talk. The memories lingered just beneath the surface. Sometimes, at night, Serena would think she caught a whiff of that faint candle wax odor. Feeling the hair stand on her neck, she whispered a silent prayer that the future would remain their own, not dictated by any malevolent toy's predictions. To this day, she keeps the stories locked away in her heart, hoping the family's nightmares remain no more than an unpleasant echo. Yet, late in the still hours, when the moonlight filters through the windows, her thoughts wander back to that long-ago inheritance, a simple, intricate toy house with the power to foresee tragedies. She can't help but picture its vacant rooms filled with flickering lights and silent dolls, all awaiting a command from forces unseen. And although the dollhouse is gone, she will never quite escape the sense that somewhere, in some hidden dust-laden corner, it, or whatever haunted it, still watches, a dark miniature reflection of all that could be, biding its time to conjure the next dreadful prophecy.